As we continue down this road of Reset-ember, the general idea of getting back on track and doing things differently, of a renewed emphasis on what will be better in the long run. we we come to a day that is important to me personally, and that's 9/11. However, it's not the one that comes to mind when you think of it. It is 9/11 of 2011, which was the debut of me as a professional wrestler in the state I'm from, Ohio. And so this week on Mr. Super Oz, I'm going to chronicle the time leading in up to that. Since last week on Sunday we talked about those who influenced me to want to be a wrestler and how. This week we're going to talk about my time as a wrestler, how it began, and yeah, where it went along the way. So after the open, that's what I'm going to talk about. So while I was thinking about this video, things came back to my mind that I I hadn't really thought about in a long time. So generally, when I talk about or think about my time in wrestling, I think of a specific friend who has been here on the channel with us before, Mr. Thomas, a man that I call G. And so the reason that's, or the reason that is the case, the reason he always comes to mind is because when we were both deployed to Iraq, my my mother, she would send me wrestling magazines, and I would read them in the dining facility. So he, G, walked up to me one day. This is the first day we met, as far as I can recall, at least. It's the first day we talked, and we had met before. It wasn't so substantial. And he said, "Where'd you find that?" And I said, "Well, I didn't. My mom sent it to me because she knows I can't get them here." He's like, "Oh, that's awesome." He's like, "Man, I've always wanted to be a wrestler." I was like, "Hey, me too." And so during the time that we were overseas, the time that we were deployed, we collectively decided whichever one of us gets back home, to home base first, which was Hawaii, not actual home, but back to America first. We'll find a wrestling school. That way that we can both achieve what we had wanted long before we ever enlisted. However, the thing that crossed my mind as I was contemplating making this video was I actually remembered going to wrestling school, a different wrestling school, before I even enlisted. So the week, maybe the Monday after my 18th birthday, I went to the local wrestling school that I knew that existed from knowing the indies in the area. I'd go to like the bingo hall or the VFW, wherever they're having a show. And so eventually I got to the place where I knew who's doing what and in most cases where. So, like I said, I believe it was the Monday after my 18th birthday. It could be like a Wednesday. Time is it messes with your uh, memory a little bit, but so years before I meet G. So, because I turned 20 in Iraq. I almost turned 21, but I was back in Hawaii right before my 21st birthday. But right after my 18th birthday, I go to the local wrestling training camp in Nowhere, Ohio. And it's in this, I feel like it was like a Catholic school. Maybe it was a church and the room just looked like a school. But I can totally remember showing up wearing like construction boots because even though I understood, wrestling to be what it is, still visually speaking, when I see the guys wearing boots, I was like, oh, I'll wear these boots because hey, they're boots. But they weren't those boots, not not wrestling boots, because no matter what you think you don't know everything until you live it. And even then, as you live, you learn more. So that was just a fun little development of the first time I tried my hand at getting into wrestling. And it was just, something so small as to come to that realization. It was like, of course they're not like boots you buy off of the, Western Wrangler or whatever shelf, because it's different. But when I was freshly 18, I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll just wear these boots because they wear boots. And so it was dumb. And then the next time I came in, tennis shooting it up, being smart about it. But it was, so it wasn't long after the training that I started that I had realized, man, I'm just not going to be able to afford to stay here and prosper. And so I it had to have been by March, maybe even February or March of the next year. So September I start training. February or March I go to a recruiting station in Nowhere, Ohio, and I'm like, man, I got to get out of here. And they're like, well, if you really want it, here's what you do. And so I did, and so I enlisted. I never gave up on wrestling per se, but I was like, I've got to I've got to find a different way to uh, move forward. And so I do basic training in AIT, and I'm in Hawaii for a very short time. Then boom, we hear the deployment's coming up. We go to the Mojave Desert and in preparation to get acclimated to the new temperature stuff. But like I said, when I'm in Iraq, so many awesome caring people sending packages to say, oh, we're here for you and whatnot. Like I still remember, this one. It wasn't to me specifically, but like a care package came in and it had a Wildcats graphic novel. And I was like, man, I love Wildcats, the cartoon and the comic. So I grabbed that up out of there. But yeah, when I was deployed to Iraq, I met Mr. Thomas, like I said, who's been on the channel. We made that agreement that whichever one of us gets home first to America will find a training school, because we've got to make this dream happen. And it was me. I made it back. I think it was September 19th, could be the 20th, something like that. I made it back to Hawaii around that time so I could turn 21 in Hawaii. I had a master sergeant who when he heard that I wasn't going to make it back to Hawaii until October, he's like, hey, you turned 20 here, right? And I said, yeah. He's like, and your birthday's when? I told him, and he was like, yeah, that's not happening. You're not turning 20 and 21 here. So he got my flight bumped up. Awesome guy. Always there for me. But so the point of this is getting in to wrestling. And so I get back to Hawaii. I turn 21, have a fun party, but party time ended when I found Hawaii Championship Wrestling, and the trainer there was Mike Shayer. I mean, Micah Taylor was his wrestling name, but Mike Shayer, great guy, great trainer. Worked in Ohio Valley Wrestling, worked in Deep South Wrestling, still working to this day. Him and his wife Tracy, they've been on um, a wife swap, so that was funny. I think that was the show, but something like that. One of those reality shows where they follow folks around and they do, whatever they do the gimmick. But yeah, so I find Hawaii Championship Wrestling, and I hit up G. I sent him an email while he's still over in Iraq. I said, "This is what we're doing." Because first I'm like, hey, what day you getting back? He tells me, and I'm like, well, training days are Wednesdays and Saturdays. We got to do this. He was down. He was ready to go. So as soon as he gets back to Hawaii, we begin training. And so it was funny. I had gone to a few Hawaii Championship Wrestling shows while training, and possibly even before. Well, actually, I know I went to one before I was training because I met Samoa Joe there. Before I'd ever even started training. So that was fun. But I had been so comfortable and confident to speak my mind that I rubbed some of the wrestlers wrong, because when they first came in, so well, like I said, every Wednesday and Saturday we would do training, but not all of the guys were there at every training session. Sometimes guys would pop in and help out, and sometimes they would just not be there, and it would just be Mike and Tracy helping the people learn. But I remember one time I was telling a wrestler who learned from Dean Malenko that, I thought if you did a little bit of different character work, you might get a better reaction when you're out there. Basically, I don't remember my exact verbiage, but I do recall explicitly that after that day, Mike came up to me and was like, "Hey, Kevin hates you." I was like, "Oh, great." He was like, "Yeah, so I'm gonna have you guys work together on the upcoming show," and I was befuddled. I didn't understand what the purpose behind that was. But it all became more clear as time went on. So, what Mike meant when he said he was going to have us work together is, so my original character in Hawaii Championship Wrestling came about almost by accident. So we start training in early October, and then come January, there was a show, and I think a guy hurt his leg. Somebody else never came back to the island after they went home for Christmas, and another person was sick. So we were down a big number of wrestlers for the show in January. So on the Wednesday before that Saturday show, Mike comes to me and G, and then he's like, "Hey, guess who's debuting tonight, guys?" We knew he meant us, but we didn't understand what we were going to do. We thought we'd have more time. So, because, October, November, December, that's 3 months. Now we're early in January. So 3 months into training, we're like, we hadn't bought boots. We didn't have gear. We had knee pads because of all the bumping we were doing on Wednesdays and Saturdays. But, went knee pads, elbow pads, but we hadn't bought boots yet. We were still, tennis shoeing it up and t-shirts and shorts because, we didn't realize we were going to be debuting after just 3 months. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I mean, we could have maybe even missed a training in December due to the holidays. But anyway, so that Saturday, we come to the show, and Mike's laying it all out. He says, "Okay, so you guys are going to go on second. Oz, you're cutting a promo. Geo interrupt. We'll ring the bell. Ding ding. I think it was around the 12-minute mark, approximately. It could have been, I don't know. Could have been 9. Could have been 12 minutes. Whatever it was. I powder out of the ring, and Kevin, the guy who I had been attempting to help, but he thought that I was impolite, was going to come down and get involved, costing G the match. I would then continue my promo, which when I met Jake Roberts, I said, "Hey, I stole your line from the funeral parlor where you said before I was so rudely interrupted." When he smashed Taker's hand into the casket, but he said, "Hey, call it your own, kid." Jake was a great guy to meet. But so then I finished my promo and explained how that I wasn't talking about myself when I was coming out here talking about the future of Hawaii Championship Wrestling. I was talking about like this new client. So I was like a merger of Paul Heyman, the agent, JBL, the stockbroker, and the arrogant Ted DiBiase, rich wrestler character. But like I said, it all came about by accident. So what happened was, on that Wednesday before the show, Mike lets me and G know that we're debuting, and he says, we tell him, "Hey, we don't got gear, I don't got no trunks or your long tights or singlet, nothing." And he's like, "Well, what do you got, to put something together?" And I said, "Well, I have a few custom tailored suits that I had made in Iraq, because they were dirt cheap, basically." And he's like, "Okay, cool, you're rich. Just that easy." He was like, "Make it happen." And so he asked G, "Hey, what do you got going on?" He's like, "I mean, clearly I got the knee pads, the elbow pads, but I also got some, not quite boxing, but like, not UFC, but just like some, like sparring, wraps." And he's like, "I got kick pads from kickboxing classes and stuff." And he's like, "Cool, you're a street fighter." And so, just that simple, Mike had conceived who we were to be on Saturday. And so, for the next, I don't know, 8-9 months, we had the time of our lives, and things were so enjoyable. Like, it wasn't just me and G, and it wasn't just Mike and Tracy, but like there were other guys, Crazy Chris. I can't remember his last name, but he had a smiley face mask that he wore. Tilo Vasaga, our friend Ute Fayu, but he went by Tilo Vasaga, who was an albino Samoan. Honestly, he's what inspired Dom to have a abnormal complexion, because Tilo turned his albino Samoan character into a big deal. Not he by himself, but he and Ohio Valley Wrestling turned his his appearance into an asset when he worked for OVW. And so that's what inspired to turn Dom in Everlasting Survivors All Day Long Volume 1, available now at Etsy.com, into having an abnormal complexion, is because it was inspired by, the real life friendship. So, anyway, so that's just the foundational beginning part of the whole thing, right? It was cool. There was, so many good times. But like I said, that was 2008. I think 2008. Yeah, it feels right. It feels like right to be 2008, I think. But for all of 2009 and 2010, I basically took the time off from wrestling, and and as we were entering, well, actually, I think it might have yeah, as we're entering 2011, I think that's when things really started getting back on track. Like I had reconnected with a friend that I swear he not only but primarily became a friend because I think I was 15. I was chanting his initials DDK when he was a heel at a show where he was being vicious, and I don't know, I was just being a dumb kid, and he just looked at me all confused like, what are you doing, I'm the bad guy. But anyway, he was a person that Dante is his real name, but he's a person I became friends with uh, over time, and so I would pop into a lot of his shows and help set up the ring, and take bumps and do stuff uh, for multiple different companies. Every pretty much not every, but a lot of the places he went. Set up for WBW, I think, World's Best Wrestling. Set up for Next Gen Wrestling. Um, WWC, World Wrestling uh, Coalition, uh, not Puerto Rico. um, I could swear at least a couple more. But anyway, so throughout the year of 2011, I'm here and there, but not all the time in it. Really, not at every show, not at every event, and not always bumping. It wasn't the same as Hawaii, but that's the beauty of Uncle Sam. Helping out with the housing and the eating and the all the not having to worry about the how you're gonna make it from day to day. It gives you that ability to have some freedom when it comes to what you do on your off time, especially in Hawaii. Um, but anyway, so in 2011, I see this advertisement for an upcoming event. It's on 9/11 of 2011, and at this point, I'm still in the National Guard. So my first 3 years, I was active duty. I had a 3-year contract to be in Hawaii. 15 months of that 3-year contract was spent in Tikrit, Camp Spiker, Iraq. But still, when it finished up, went back to Hawaii, finished out, had the great time in wrestling. But when those 3 years were done, I then did 3 years in the National Guard. And when that time, or during that time, things, it was lean times, basically. It was not quite hard times like Dusty would say, but things were not exceptionally excellent. And so that's why I didn't make it to all the shows, and being in a place where you got ice storms and snowstorms, and just you got to travel far to get to where you're going. It's like it wasn't easy. But when I saw this poster that said a show is happening on 9/11 of 2011, I did what the viewers of this channel know I often do, and I fantasy booked. It wasn't all that dissimilar to what I do every Wednesday night on the Wednesday Night Wrestling Remix. I fantasy booked, but this time I fantasy booked me. I fantasy booked my debut in this promotion, and I did a very important thing because it worked out. And I reached out to my friend Dante, and I said, "Hey man, are you on?" I can't remember now if I saw him on the poster or if I just knew that he had worked there. And I was like, "Are you on this show? Because if you are, I need to be on this show. Like I have this pitch," and I laid it out for him. I said, I'll come in mid after the opening bell, sit down in uniform, and that way it's as if I just got off work basically, and I just had to come see the show, in my home area, and I said then a heel would call me out, say, "Hey, this so and so such and such stuff," and he was into it because he was having an anti the Booker storyline anyway, and so he was going to come out on the show and complain about not being, or not complain, but let people know he wasn't being used. And so he was like, "Oh, this will work. These two things will blend perfectly together." Say how that his rant can lead into him talking to me, and then we'll go at it, and then I'll believe his insincere apology. I'll turn, get attacked, babyface run in, lead to great business was the hope. So for the first, so in case it wasn't obvious before, my entire run in Hawaii, I was a bad guy. Like I said, Paul Heyman, Ted DiBiase, JBL rolled into one, basically, right? And so for the first night of my entire time in the wrestling landscape, I get to be a good guy. It's what I've always wanted. I love the idea of the, selling the t-shirts, the hats, the 8x10s, taking the picture, shaking the hands. Oh my goodness. I can remember times when I would show up to, the indie shows that I was saying where, I would help set up and, do stuff. And the kids would run, like, "Oh, are you a wrestler?" Because I'm not exactly small and I stand out. And I'm like, well, at that point, I didn't feel comfortable to be like, yes, because I'm not on the show, but I also didn't want to say no because it felt like I'm admitting defeat. So I would just be like, I'm not a wrestler tonight, kid. But yeah, for that night, for 9/11 of 2011, I got to be what I wanted to be. Man, I can still remember. So vividly, even 11 years later. I say to Dante in the back before anybody's in the crowd, before I'm going around the back to pretend like I'm running late. I say, "What do you want me to say?" And he just said, "I trust you. It's gonna be all right." And that is such a blessing of a thing to hear when when you don't know if it's gonna work, but somebody else says, "I trust you, I believe in you," and then the best part was, so he calls me out. I'm in the crowd. He calls me out midway. During this segment, he says all these things, and I'm just standing there, and he's like, "Oh, what do you got to say for yourself?" And I remember saying, "You're welcome." And then I, cut this babyface promo of saying how that, you're welcome for the freedoms to say what you feel, and, just putting over the whole gimmick of being a National Guardian. And that's what I ended up calling the character, the National Guardian. Which is, every week hearing this, every week, because on the Wednesday Night Wrestling movie, that painting's always in the back, but yeah, the National Guardian was the, and hell, heck, this too, that was National Guardian stuff, but, it was so meaningful, it was so impactful. Like, I wish that family could have been there, but, that is what it is. It was so fulfilling to be in that place and that time that that I always personally thought, man, this is what I want. This is what I think can be valuable. And so it's just so amazing to have that realization, that culmination of work and ideas and things just working out. And so for the next I swear it was the next 6 months. Yeah, 6 feels right. For the next 6 months, could have been 7, but 6-7 months. Me and Dante are working together. I don't make every show because of the National Guard. Because 1 weekend of the month sometimes would coincide with the show. But I had friends who I went to Ohio University with show up to all the shows, and they would shoot them, and then I would later edit them, and um, it was just so good and fun, and like I said, rewarding. It was great. Dante became world champion. I got my first victory in a wrestling match because every match I ever had in Hawaii, I lost, but you know it made sense because I was both the mouthpiece for another wrestler, and I was primarily in storyline a businessman, so it made sense to lose. But I had so much fun losing. It was great because you know messing with the crowd, getting in their face, and then you know getting their revenge, if you will, um, and seeing the bad guy lose. Yeah, it was super good times. But yeah. So like I said, this whole month of September is just uh like I said, it's been branded as Reset-ember. It's a reflection on what was and what can be. Next week on the continuation of Reset-ember, I'm going to talk about everlasting origins. And with that, I will break down what started the creation of the graphic novel that is available at Etsy.com, limited first printings. Um, what created, like I said, what created the beginning, what helped it progress, and then how we got to where it is now. And basically just go over why it was such a long process from conception to execution. Yeah, and so thank you for watching this week's episode uh, on Mr. Super Oz, the if you will, the origin story of my professional wrestling time.